Oh, gosh. That was a lot.
That was a lot.
That was very nerdy. That went a lot nerdier than I thought it would go.
It's interesting because people, I think in general, don't realize how much at length they could talk about subjects. Just because you don't really care enough to think about it. Not that you don't think that you could, but I think I had so many more questions lined up, but we were just wrapping up.
Yeah.
I wanted to get into my second topic that I did want to do was kind of just your spiritual, mental, physical growth over the past since college.
Sure.
But we just didn't get to it because it was like an hour.
Yeah.
So
did I talk too much?
No, that was perfect.
Okay.
I should have said this before, but I would prefer like a 10%, 90% split because it's not a me thing. It's not a me podcast. It's a guest podcast, right? So I feel bad when it feels like people are just rattling off stuff that they know. So I try to give it a little bit of a you spin on things like, what is your opinion on this, blah, blah, blah. But I'm sure you were just regurgitating a bunch of information.
Man, I wish we talked about other stuff than biostatistics, Eric.
People are like,
too much.
Oh, David, the biostatistics guy.
Yeah, now they're like, man. And I was like also like thinking about like, oh man, my tone sounds really boring.
Really nerdy.
Like, I think I'm really gonna put people to sleep.
How about this? Do you have time? I was gonna actually have a bonus episode where we talk about any tertiary stuff, secondary stuff, because we're already kind of running out of episodes for the season, or we already ran out. So if you'd be interested, we could talk about interesting stuff.
Yeah. No, I'm down. I'm down to talk more. It's just like I was like caught off guard that we were gonna talk about biostatistics for like I don't even talk like that with like my friends.
Right. And you were great at it though. Like you went into so in depth.
I thought I was getting interviewed, man. Like I was like
break out the interview. Wait, what are the interview questions like for biostatistics? I just like
so like for when I was hired for Hopkins, I was like it was more behavioral.
Okay, yeah.
But
I'm sure they'd ask you like random statistics.
Yeah. But for my current company, they were a little bit more technical. They wanted my writing sample, they wanted my codes, they wanted to see how good I was at my job. So they would ask me questions like, oh, how do you interpret like this result? And there's like a very specific way that statisticians interpret certain things.
So if someone doesn't know that, then they're clearly like
so like how do you like what does this odds ratio mean or hazard ratio mean? And it's just like we just have to like explain it exactly how we were taught to explain it.
So because in CS a lot of those terms, like we have similar things, but a lot of times we don't use those in our day-to-day, because it's like why would we need to know this basic term? So if you do you get a study for those, or do you just already like kind of know the basic stuff?
I mean, I had to learn it in grad school, and so now I just kind of know
second nature.
Second nature.
That's
at this
fair.
point. But like in the beginning, I was like, I had no idea. Like, and then it's like we have like different ways to transform those values to make it more interpretable and stuff like that. And now I don't really remember too much, but I don't think I need it.
Sure. Sounds boring.
It's boring, man. Eric, my podcast is gonna be the least views.
Wait, no, I think it was actually really interesting though. Like it was very It was very interesting for me. I agree. So if we were to go into a different topic, do you think that line of questioning, kind of your spiritual, mental, physical growth, would be something you could be more personal about?
Yeah, I could make it more interesting.
Sure. Oh, but how about if besides that, is there anything else in general that you think you would want to talk about? Now that you kind of know like the general flow.
No. I mean, like, personally, I like when, like we get really personal. I mean, that's how I like having conversations.
Sure.
What I hate is not hate, that's a strong word. What I don't prefer as much is like very like superficial.
Right. Yeah. Like how's the weather? What do you do for work? Blah, blah.
Like, stuff like that. And so I like being pretty open about my life. Although like I don't know how people will take it, but
sure.
I mean, I've had some pretty traumatic experiences too that I could talk about.
Sure.
Stuff like that.
Well,
so
let's delve into that then. That
Okay.
sounds like a great second podcast topic. So just jumping right into it. Let's see. Let me collect. How has your spiritual perspective evolved or deepened maybe since your college times?
Yeah, I mean, you know, growing up, like I've always went to church. You know, my family, you know, grew up from a well, actually, no, my dad was a Buddhist when he was younger, but eventually he came to Christ, you know, way before I was born. And my mom also.
Was this when they were in the States?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. So they actually met in the States. They met in Ohio. And there's like a small, you know, group of Koreans and they just kind of.
Gotta imagine it's pretty small.
Yeah.
Ohio in the, what, 70s probably? 60s?
Yeah. 70s. Yeah. 70s, maybe 80s.
Sure.
If anything. And it's funny, like, they met actually playing, you know, that red card game Ghost Off. That's how they met.
Oh, that's...
My mom is cracked.
Yeah, I imagine.
At that game.
I mean, not much to do out in Ohio, right? Besides
yeah,
Ghost
exactly.
Off.
Yeah. And no internet, like no nothing. So what do? You just play Ghost Off. But yeah, so I grew up from a Christian background, always went to church and, you know, everything was pretty like, I was like, relatively a pretty good like Tushu. Like I was, you know, I tried to listen to my parents the best way I can, and of course, like I've had my fair share of like troubles, but like you know, I really do find that I really do think it's very fortunate for me like that I like was able to like go to church like every Sunday. And I really do thank God for allowing me to see the importance of going to church on Sundays. And so, you know, I think like, I mean, college was like pretty like typical, like, you know, like UVA has like what GCF. Like we also had a group called KCM and we call it Korean Campus Ministry. And like, it was basically a bunch of like Asians who love God and they want to like you know have fun, have fellowship, but also like positively influence each other. And so that's kind of like how my college years went. So like if anything, I never really struggled spiritually during that time. I probably struggled a little bit in grad school just because I was all alone in Michigan. And no one was really holding me accountable. Sure. Like, you know, I didn't have anyone to hold me accountable. Right. And so like, you know, I'll try to go to church every Sunday and I'll try to serve there too. And I think in general, it was okay. I mean, I did have like a couple like phases where I didn't go to church for weeks, but, you know, I like God reminded me to always go to
As he
church.
Always does.
And so, yeah. And so I don't think I really, like, fortunately, I never really had a lot of hardships and suffering that made me want to question, like, God's existence or God's intentions. Probably not until, I would say, about 3 years ago.
Gotcha.
And so... so yeah, like, I think, like, so this is like a personal story, that I was, sorry, I don't know if I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to phrase it, but, yeah, so like I was actually like in a relationship at the time, and I was in a relationship with this person for about 6 years, and, I think at a certain point, I really thought that like, you know, she was like my future and that like, you know, I wanted to pursue something more with her than just a relationship. And so I would say that probably happened around like 2017. And that's when I started thinking about, how I'm going to plan my future, like where am I going to settle, like how I'm going to save money and stuff like that. And fast forward to 2020 came around, like I wanted to propose. And so I actually proposed to, her at the time, and we were engaged for about 3 months. And then after 3 months, so she was on the other side of the country. She was in California at the time because she was doing her residency.
Gotcha.
In optometry. And so that was going to be like a year long. And so the plan was for us to kind of like think about like how like our wedding's going to be, and then how we're going to get there, and then who's in charge of what, and stuff like that. And so that's how we were going to tackle our year long of like long distance. But after 3 months, things were just getting really hard. Sure. And I think there was an underlying problem to our relationship. I just think that neither of us really addressed it. And essentially, we went through some counseling. We went through some just time to ourselves to think about, what we want. And essentially, like, we decided to part ways, and that was really hard. I think especially because during that time of when I decided that I wanted to start a future with this person, and just like basically making my decisions based on that, like what sets, like how can I put myself in best position to like have a future with her that I want, like and like when everything kind of crumbled, like I felt like I just completely just like lost myself. Like I lost my purpose. Like I lost like just any sort of motivation to like, keep going. Like I was just constantly just like in mood swings. Like I was laughing at one point, then I'll be crying at another time point. Like it was just like really hard. And like I remember like so many times, like I wanted to like curse at God.
Sure.
Like I was like, God, like why did you let this happen to me? Like why did you let me go this far for you to make me realize that this wasn't the end? And like, I was just trying to find answers, and I was just getting more and more frustrated that like I was just met with a lot of silence from God. And so like I remember I would just go to church like in the middle of the night, pitch dark. I would just like I had the key to my old church, and so I would just go in whenever I wanted to, and just sit in the sanctuary in complete darkness, and I would just like talk to God. Like I wouldn't necessarily call it a prayer, but I would just like talk to him and just like let him know like what I'm really frustrated by and why I'm so like mad and upset and sad. And I was, I actually even like cursed at him, like, and just like questioned him, and like wanted to like wrestle with him, and through all of those things, like I just kind of, I think that was probably the time when I struggled, like, or my spiritual life, like my spiritual walk with God has been tested the most. Like even like, Pastor Brian, like he would try to explain to me, like, or try to tell me that everything's going to be okay. And I just couldn't believe anyone. Like, I'm just like thinking to myself, like, no, it's not gonna be okay. I'm like doomed. Like this is like I'm like screwed essentially. But it took some time, and I had to seek like counseling, and just really like dig deeper into like my issues, and just figure out why things happened the way it did. But at a certain point, I had this realization. I remember I was so like I went through like different, people say like there's like 5 different stages of how to like handle grief. Like grief. And I like tapped into all of that, like, and not even in any particular order. And but like I remember like I was like coming home, and I was thinking about this idea that like, why is God so silent? Why won't God like show me or like tell me like what's going on? Like, why wouldn't God just like tell me the answer, so so at the very least I feel a little bit of peace? Like, why can't God just show me like some sort of a closure so that I can like, I don't have to like cry every day. And like, I think like at some point I was listening to like Tim Keller podcast, and he was just talking about like how to handle suffering and pain and stuff like that. And I just had like a random like epiphany that like God was not being silent necessarily. He was actually being patient with me. And that was a huge realization that I had, that, God, who is my father, who is, in control of all things, like, with such high position as somebody who God is, like, you just imagine like I'm just like cursing at him, I'm just like getting upset at him, like I'm just throwing a tantrum, and he could have easily been like, you're done, right. But like the fact that he was just waiting, he wasn't being silent, he was waiting for me to just like, have this realization that, God is still going to work through all of this, and that, he's going to help me realize a lot of different things that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. That I think like it was probably like 3-4 months in is when I first felt like this like peace for the first time. And it's been like, for those 3-4 months, it was just misery, like for every day and every second, like I like had to figure out a way to just like attach myself to different people. Like, we'll go to my brother's house sometimes, and go to my cousin's house or my friend's house, and we just like cry every day, just being in misery. But yeah, like after that realization, of course I still had my ups and downs, but like, I realized that even those 3-4 months that I was in misery, like I realized at that moment, like I was still seeking God at that time. And that really spoke loud to me, in the sense of like I was still faithful to him, even though I was mad at him. But the fact that I even thought about him, like, made me understand that, like, I obviously still believe that he exists in my life, and so like that was actually just like a really like just a really learning experience that like I felt like I needed to go through. I did like try to like, I tried different things to like work on myself, and try to dissect more into why like I felt this like, like I was like lost, and I'm just like, I felt like I was doomed, and like nothing else matters. I just didn't have a purpose in life. And I think it really came down to just me not valuing myself and trying to find my value and my worth through other people. And I know that's a very common struggle that a lot of people face. And so like, during my time of singlehood, like I really worked hard to really try to find my worth and my value, and trying very hard not to seek other people's validation, and just to be able to validate myself, because, you know, it's not my own works. Like it's you know, like I don't find, you know, my favorite passage in the Bible is just simply like, it's not I who live, but Christ who lives in me.
Sure.
Like I really felt like that spoke very loudly to me, in that like I don't need to find my worth and my value through other people, and that the only value I need to find is from Christ and his work and what he is, you know, what God is going to do through me, you know, to me and through me. And so I spent a lot of time just like working on that. And the 4 things that I really wanted to work on and set that as my goal is: 1, I wanted to get healthier, like physically. Wanted to, you know, back then I weighed close to like 250. And like, I just loved eating just unhealthy food.
How much do you weigh now?
I hover now anywhere from like 186 to like 189.
Big transformation.
Yeah. And so, you know, and I like did that by just like going to the gym, and so that was actually a new discovery that I really enjoy doing, is to go to the gym and actually work out. Like I hated doing that when I was little, and I never found a good motivation to go. But I think after what I've been through, like I realized that one thing I needed to figure out was, how do I spend time alone? Because I was always just attaching myself to other people, and I knew that wasn't sustainable. And so I was trying to think about what's the best way to spend time alone. And I thought about, you know, going to the gym and like work out and, you know, just, I was able to find that very like stress relieving. And it was just like a healthy way of relieving stress mentally. And so I think that's why I started like getting more into it. Sure. And then the body recomposition started to kick in, but I didn't even notice that I was like losing weight, or just like, you know, the body transformation thing. Like I was not able to really see that, because I was just so focused on trying to get better mentally. And the reason why is because like I really wanted to be better for the people who were supporting me at the time. Like I knew I was a burden. I knew I was, you know, causing stress in other people's lives, even though I know they'll tell me like,
it's okay.
It's okay. Or it's not even a stress at all. I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, you know, like, and I obviously really appreciated that. And so one thing I really had to come in terms with was like, I knew that I was a burden, and that's just what it's going to be. In order for you to get through what you have to get through. But your responsibility is to make sure that you are trying to better yourself as quickly as you can, so that you don't need to rely on them. And so the whole gymming thing really came into play when I started thinking about it from that perspective. Second thing was like, I wanted to like be more independent mentally, and like not really wanted to rely on other people for anything, for my own happiness or whatever. And so like, you know, and for that, like I really wanted to just be more like reliable, and be more stable of a person. And I thought like, I really wanted to move out of my parents' place, because I realized I was like depending on my parents way too much for whether that is like food, like clothes, like, and there's like, I was like a little kid, you know? And so like everything was figured out for me, but I really wanted to do that myself. And I was at an age, I was like, it's like embarrassing to say, but I was like 28 at the time. And I really wanted to like, you know, venture out on my own, which is why I moved down here to Arlington. And so like, I wanted to be more stable. And the third thing was just like I wanted to really work on my spiritual walk with God and just be able to grow in that sort of way. And like I knew that like, you know, with all these like hardships, it's going to produce, you know, character and perseverance and all that stuff. And so like I really wanted to grow. And so that's obviously that's an ongoing journey that, you know, I'm going to keep going, I guess. Sure. Still like trying to think of the last one, but I forget. But anyway, I like, you know, these are the things that I really worked a lot on for, you know, as long as I was single. And I really do thank God for allowing me to be where I am today through all of this. And I think one of the biggest blessings I learned was that like he really demonstrated that he was always faithful and he was always by me, even though I may not feel it. Like it's not that he wasn't there, it's just my inability. And so, yeah.
So I noticed that, you know, as you're saying how your get well plan, it was marked by a lot of intentionality. Do you think that intentionality was there before you had to go through all this, or do you think it was kind of in lieu of the pain that you're dealing with that you developed that level of independence and that intentionality and were able to kind of build that for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's more the latter. Honestly, like I think, and you know, it's funny because I was talking to my when I was getting counseling at the time, my counselor would ask me like, I would like just like vent, right? I'll just like tell them like this and this and this happened, and I'm just like so frustrated, I'm so mad, I'm so sad, like, you know, like I don't want to like keep going, like it just sucks. And like, and then my counselor would just sit there and just like would listen very patiently, and he would just ask me like, oh, so like David, like just a quick question, like when's like the last time you've experienced like pain and suffering as something that is even close to this? Like when's the last time you experienced that? And I just like sat there for like in silence for like 30 seconds. Him and I were just sitting there in silence, and I was just like, okay, to be honest, I don't think I've experienced like this level of pain or suffering before. In fact, I don't think that I suffered all that much throughout my life. And that's obviously that was a huge blessing from God, that I was able to grow up very like relatively peacefully. Sure. You know, so like it helped me understand that like this pain and suffering I'm going through, I'm reacting much stronger because this was my first time like going through something like this to this intensity. And so like I think from that I was able to kind of, after I was able to understand that, I think I was able to dissect a little into more about like what made me unhappy, like what made me sad, and like what is it about pain and suffering that made me so weak, and why am I so weak? And so like I think that's kind of like just going down that, you know, rabbit hole made me understand like ultimately like I need to be better. And another thing that my counselor asked me was like, I understand that you feel like, I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is that you don't really deserve this pain and suffering. But if you were to like ask yourself genuinely, like, and honestly, like, would you say that you were properly equipped to be a husband that you envisioned yourself to be? And I remember I just like took some time to think about it, and I was like, okay, as much as I'm upset, as much as I'm like mad and sad, like I think ultimately I don't think I was ready. I think things were too easy. I think things were just handed to me too easily, like, you know. And so like I realized that like that's when I realized like God is putting these he's letting these pain and suffering come into my life so that I can be stronger, and therefore my faith will be stronger for him, and be able to just grow from all this. And so I think that's what made me really think about like how to be more intentional with my life, and put more work into the things that I want to work on. And that it helped me realize that like the world doesn't evolve around you. Like the world's going to keep going the way it operates. And it's really up to you in terms of how you want to mold yourself into the society, and the decision. And that all comes with the decisions you make and the consequences that come from the decisions. And so, you know, I told myself, like, you can just choose to sit there and you can just sulk and complain like every day until you run out of things to complain about. Or like you can do something about it, and you can like take this experience and, you know, let it be a blessing to other people someday at some point. That like, you know, this is your story. This is the story that is going to, you know, hopefully like allow other people to see that God is truly faithful, and that he is working through every, you know, each and one of us. Although that journey may look very different from person to person. I remember like thinking to myself that like, I really want this pain and this experience to not go to waste and just be miserable every day, but rather like use this to kind of propel myself forward, and really understand like, you know, how God is working in my life. So
do you think you would be able to have been able to get to where you are now without having to have gone through that pain and suffering over time, maybe? Or do you think that it was kind of necessary just knowing yourself? I'm not saying that it was a good thing, obviously, but, you know, just in terms of, you know, how you are as a person.
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked this question a lot by different people whom I've shared this with. But I think my ultimate answer is that, so one, like, of course, I don't wish upon this to anyone.
Sure.
Like, even if somebody like, I mean, even if it's somebody I don't like, let's say, like, I wouldn't even wish that upon them.
Right.
And because it was just so excruciating. Like, you know, I mean, people deal with heartbreaks all the time. And so like, it's not, you know, uncommon, but like at the same time, like, I think my answer is just whatever had happened is what was best. And so like, God let this happen. He let, you know, a broken engagement come into play in my life, in order for me to see the things that I needed to see. And I believe that that is the best.
Sure.
And like, yeah, we could think about the shoulda, coulda, woulda. Like,
right.
You know, I could have handled the situation much differently. I don't know. But at the end of the day, like, I think through this experience, like, I learned that, like, no matter what I do, no matter the decisions that I make, ultimately, like, God is in control, and that it's not going to, you know, no matter like what decisions I make, I feel like God will never let me deviate away from him. That would steal his glory ultimately, because I think ultimately he cares about his glory the most. And we are just we are created for his glory. And so like, you know, as much as, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into this whole like free will, but like,
I don't think I'm equipped to be able to argue about that.
No, not that I'm equipped either, but like, I really do think that, like, you know, whatever decisions I make ultimately is what I'm trying to say is, no matter what decisions I make, it doesn't really matter, because like ultimately God is in control and he's going to take care of me. And so I think what had happened is what was best. And I don't think about what could have happened or what should have happened anymore. And that's kind of how I answer the question to everyone who asks me the same question.
Yeah. It's kind of it happened, and you don't want to attribute like good bad to something that just an event, right?
Yeah.
It's life, as you said, it happened and you can't take it back. You can't, and living in regret is kind of just unhelpful, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah. I'm very against like ruminating and feeling any sort of regret.
Sure.
I think I just have like a defense mechanism or like a coping mechanism whenever I start to feel like, oh, I should have, but I'm just like, nope, like it happened and let's just like move on. Life moves on. So yeah, I mean, I try not to think about that kind of stuff.
Sure. So I noticed you said that you wanted to get a lot more, maybe not independent, but be able to be okay as an independent person. Do you think has that ever been taken too far? Do you think?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. I mean, like I think like us as humans, like we tend to like work as like a pendulum. Like if we're extreme on one end, then we tend to, and the moment we realize that needs a change, then we swing too hard on the other side. And so, yeah, like one of my friends actually asked me this question. He was like, well, it looks like you've like been working on the things that you said you wanted to work on. But has there been any like new challenges, like new demons that like you're facing like after going through all this? And yeah, I think I've dealt with, some struggles being almost too independent, just not making myself available for people. And that has definitely kind of, I had to make adjustments and it was uncomfortable. Like it's like I did not want to feel any sort of dependency on other people. Sure. Like I was just so strong on that and I was so stubborn about it. But just realizing that at the end of the day, like we need people. Like, right. God created people like to like help each other and to grow from and to learn from one another. And so like, just being able to understand that and being able to kind of make small adjustments in here and there. It's still a work in progress, I think. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there are definitely challenges of, trying to be okay being independent and not wanting necessarily other people's like help or anything like that. But I've got some great friends who remind me otherwise. And so, yeah.
How does working with a counselor factor into your independence? Is it part of the independence or do you think it's a little bit of a dependence?
What do you mean?
Like being dependent on a counselor?
Oh, yeah. No, so I actually feel like, I don't know, like, I don't know if this is still the case, but I tend to think like the society kind of, or at least like Koreans specifically, tend to look at like counseling as like a taboo. Like you're like, like why are you going to like see a counselor? Sure, yeah. Like, like, is everything okay? Like they get like so like scared and it's like, no, it's just like, I'm just struggling mentally. Like there's nothing like, it's not like, it's pretty common. Like people struggle mentally all the time. Like I feel like
everyone struggles.
Everyone struggles with some level of anxiety and whatever. And different people have different ways of coping. And I tend to look at it from a perspective of like, well, God created them too. God created those counselors. Like God created them and gave them very specific gifts for them to be able to help others. And like, and so like I did, like at one point I did think about like, oh, I might just like trying to find like more practical steps and not like, looking at it from the biblical perspective or whatever. And I just felt like at the end, the conclusion I was able to draw was like, well, God has put those people in my life to help me grow and be able to see, how his glory through that, that he has created something, someone beautiful with a lot of knowledge in therapy. And so, yeah. And so like, I really do think like I honestly think everyone should go seek therapy. That's
Sure.
my opinion. Um, but different people have different ways of handling their hardships. So I understand.
Right. I'm a heavy proponent of counseling myself. I went for probably about a year or so, and
Oh, wow.
very helpful. At least for myself, it helped me figure out myself a little bit and figure out how to be independent, as you're kind of saying as well. I think, as you're saying, at least try it out, right? Like there's no harm in trying it out. Well, I guess cost, but
but also I feel like people feel ashamed that they're going to seek help. But I'm like, okay, are you ashamed of going to the hospital when you're sick?
Exactly. Yep.
And it's like, I just feel like the society looks at mental health as such something secondary to your physical health. But I'm like, I mean, some people, like when they have like mental health like issues, like it actually affects them physically too. Like biologically it affects them, like, and so like, I wish like people like could see that and understand that mental health is just as important as your physical health. So
our co-host Huijin, she's actually a counselor too.
I'm aware.
If only she were here. I actually kind of liken getting counseling to kind of working out your brain, like lifting, but instead, mentally, you're figuring out how to do better at being independent. And it's not that you're putting all that weight on the counselor. A lot of times they're trying to help you figure out for yourself what you need to do, right? They're not like telling you, oh yeah, you need to do this, and this. So why do you think that? You're like, oh, that's a great question. I don't know why. But like having the help of a professionally trained person who's had years of experience, like I feel like we'd have to be really arrogant to think that we could do everything ourselves without that, third party looking in and figuring out where our blind spots are. Because I'm sure, I know I have blind spots, and that's what I helped learn from going to my counselor. And I think everyone could at least be able to figure out a little bit more for themselves too,
Yeah. And I just feel like, or at least for people who haven't gone to counseling or therapy, whatever, like I think their idea of what like therapy looks like is actually very different than like what we know. Like when we go see counseling, it's actually a lot different. It's like they don't give you the answers. Actually, they put you in position to be able to see clarity better. Like, because I think what it is, like you said, it's like a blind spot. Like it's just, everything is just like so cloudy, and I don't know where I'm like heading, like in terms of like finding solutions or answers to my problems. But like the therapist's not going to give it to you, like give you the answer, nor do they even know like what the answer is. But they're just asking a lot of questions to help you think and help you understand. And it's kind of like ultimately at the end, the goal is for you to be able to answer the question that you've been wondering, like to yourself. Like you're able to come up with an answer to that.
Right. And it feels really rewarding when you're able to do that. You're like, oh, like it's work. The thing I've been trying to do it's paying off. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, it's, you have to work for it essentially.
It's like going to the gym and finally be able to add 5 pounds to your weight, So it takes time, but you know what? You get stronger every time you do it. So
it's true.
Yeah. So, kind of going back to kind of your convictions that you were holding, from the breakup and from all these, pain in your life, do you find it difficult as time goes on? It's 3 years later. Do you find you forget that you experience those pain? You find yourself regressing at all? Or do you think you've been able to kind of maintain that trajectory going forward?
You mean like in terms of the things I've been working on? Or?
Yeah. And in terms of that, plus, however more you grew from that.
Yeah. I mean, I get surprised by like how much I still like enjoy, like, for example, like working out. Like I just came here from the gym. Like I wanted to get my workout in. And it's now more like, I think what I find it fascinating is like how what it used to be was like for my mental stress, mental relief. Then it was about trying to like get in shape, like trying to look good or whatever, right? Now it's like it's just a lifestyle, like for me.
Sure.
Like I think I tend to like, there was a time where I stopped working out for maybe about like 2 weeks because of an injury, and also like I was just like really busy with work, and I just remember like I was just so miserable. Like I was like just like a zombie. Like my roommate Daniel, he knows this. Like I come out and I'm just like, I don't have anything. Like I'm not even shaved. Like I haven't taken a shower. Like I was just like grossed out. Like and I would just be like, just yeah, like I would just be in such misery. And the moment like I like was able to get some breather and I got a chance to work out, there was just this like immense like just like relief of stress, and just like I felt so much better that I realized like, oh, this has to be now part of my lifestyle, because if I don't now like go to the gym or whatever, like if I don't like work on myself, if I don't feel like I'm working on myself, then I think I still tend to get really down on myself.
Gotcha.
And I'm kind of like my own like worst critic when it comes to that. I think if anything, I need to be more gracious and more patient with myself, but I think I tend to be very hard on myself in general. And so, yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I feel like in some areas, yes, but in other areas, it naturally kind of gives. Like it's like, you know, I do think there is some leniency there, and I think, you know, that's just being human. Like when life just gets a little bit more comfortable, you just kind of tend to forget the things that we used to really care about.
Sure.
So.
Gotcha. So what are you trying to look for in your life right now? Well, what are your goals personally?
That's a good question. You know, I obviously do think about, you know, marriage and eventually want to get there someday. But I also, I think, but more so, like I really do think that I'm still like a work in progress. Like I'm not completely satisfied with where I want to be. Not that I'll ever be.
Sure.
But I think I'm in a stage right now in my life where I'm just trying to learn a lot from different people, and I'm always curious about, you know, certain things that I may not have any knowledge in, and just trying to grow from hearing from different people's perspective, and whether and one thing I really do find like, or that I'm really proud about myself, is that I feel like I kind of carry that with whoever I meet. So it doesn't really matter like any of your like demographics, like, you know, socioeconomic, age, whatever, like doesn't really matter to me. Like I'm always just trying to find a way to grow, because I have this understanding that everyone grew up very differently, and everyone has different background, and so like, you know, different upbringing. So like I want to learn other people's perspective in the hopes that I can have a broader range of understanding people. And so that's kind of like one thing that I'm like trying to be better at. But in terms of like, I don't know, like my current life situation, I think I am thinking about like, you know, eventually I do need to settle down and like, you know, be able to, you know, put myself in a position where I can make enough to be able to support my like for my future family, and saving up and things like that. And so yeah, I always get this like pressure from my family that, you know, like I'm not getting any younger, and yeah, and so like they're just like, you know, they're just looking forward to the day when I decide that I want to get married. But I think right now that's just kind of not been on my sight, at least these days. I just been just kind of tackling day to day, and yeah, just like enjoying. I think that's one thing, is like just I've been so focused on the future so much that like I forget a lot of times to just enjoy where I am now. And I think, I mean, that could also get extreme too, like, and that could also be bad too. But I feel like, you know, that's kind of where I'm at. I think I'm just trying to just enjoy the stage of life that I'm in right now. And so, yeah.
Everything in moderation.
Yeah, I know. That's my motto. Like, I always, you know, tell my friends that it's like, you just have to do everything in moderation. I think that's the most difficult thing.
Right.
I think because moderation comes with just self-control. It means you have to control yourself.
Right.
And nobody wants to do that. You know,
I feel like, especially in society today, where it's a lot of do what you want to do and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Like, yeah, I mean, you should do the things you want to do, but there's reasons why you shouldn't do everything all the time, you know?
Yeah.
Even good things, drinking water. You should not drink water all day because you'll die.
Yeah. And like, I said this to like, I remember like a long time ago, I was telling everyone like, yeah, like I think that's the hardest thing. And we have to do everything in moderation because anything that we do in extreme is like not good. And someone was like, well, you can be extreme about your love for Jesus. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess that's one and what, like the only thing I guess you can be extreme on. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's hard for people to just control themselves, especially if it's like something they're really passionate about, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to not do stuff that you enjoy.
Yeah.
Like, a lot, you know? Yeah. But we're actually getting close to our time again. We've been talking for 2 hours, David. Can you believe that?
Oh my gosh, I'm a chatty little boy, aren't I?
I had a great time for both parts of our talk. So,
really?
But they were very different for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I know. Yeah, I'm sorry for talking.
No, I don't know. It was great. I encourage you to talk more. In fact, if we had infinite time, I would love to continue this conversation. But how about we end with what are some takeaways you would love for people to just be able to take from you and your story and maybe be able to apply for their own life? Let's say apart from counseling, because we already discussed that.
Yeah. I guess for me is that ultimately, like, I really think that people really should understand that like we are created to really glorify God first and foremost. And especially as believers, like we need to understand that life does not evolve around us, and it's not about me, it's not about you, like, you know, it's not even about, you know, anyone other than just like God himself. And so like for me it's like I want people to I guess through my story I really would like people to be able to see that like that God is always faithful to us, and he's faithful to us because ultimately that brings him glory at the end. And so I think my takeaway is to really hoping that people are able to see my story as one of the ways where like God was truly glorified through thick and thin, through everything that I've been through. I just think like I just want people to understand that like even in my lowest of lows and the highest of highs, God was always there. And he is always there for you, you know. And even when, especially in the moments when you feel like God is not present, or you don't feel his presence, or you feel like God did you wrong, like those are the times when actually God is actually the closest to you.
Sure.
And it is actually your inability to see that or feel that, because, you know, we as humans, we just can't help but like get our emotions involved, and it's just like when things just don't go well, it's like I'm not happy and I'm not satisfied. Then it's like, God, you're doing this to me, like, you know, God, I thought you're always gonna do, you know, good things, not bad things. But it's like, no, like there's a reason for everything. Even in the smallest decisions you make, there's a reason. And so I think that's kind of what I would like people to know. Awesome. Well, I think they'll take that away for sure. So I hope so. Yeah. Well, thanks for your time, David. Again, part 2. This will come out eventually, but yeah, thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch you guys next week. All right.